Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, the aftermath of the massive collapse in Milwaukee. We'll talk about that. Plus, yes, the bench trio is still the Timberwolves' best option in almost any lineup. We'll talk about what that could mean moving forward related to the playoff rotation. It's all upcoming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Thursday, everybody. It is a game day. The Wolves get a chance to get the bad taste of Tuesday's collapse against the Bucks, the bad taste out of their mouths, hopefully tonight. The Wolves are in Memphis to take on the Grizzlies, and obviously important game. We'll talk about the standings and all that stuff, but I want to talk about the aftermath of Tuesday, some quotes from after the game, and then really kind of transition from that into like, hey, the two best players on the floor for the Wolves in this game were two of the bench trio guys, right? Naz Reid, Donte DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. That continues to be such a bright spot for Minnesota this season. What does this look like playoff time? What which is like a week from now, potentially. If they're in the play, and it could be a week from yesterday, a week from Tuesday, I think. What does this look like moving forward for Chris Finch? So we'll talk about all that on the show. We'll also talk Wolves Grizz toward the end of the program today. A big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder, you can subscribe to the newsletter, the email newsletter. It comes to you daily in your email inbox. You can subscribe at lockedondaily.com. One stop for all things Wolves, all things NBA. Some great national articles are included there. A really good roundup of Wolves news from around the internet. It's all there in your email inbox in one email each day, Monday through Friday. You can sign up at lockedondaily.com. All right. So the loss to Milwaukee. I don't want to dwell on it per se, but it was such a really kind of unforgettable collapse for all the wrong reasons that we kind of have to talk a little more about it. And it's going to segue nicely, I believe, into the lineup piece that I want to spend most of today talking about. John Krasinski did a good job on Twitter, always does a good job, did a good job on X of transcribing some quotes that I think are key quotes from after the game from the locker room and from Chris Finch's post-game comments. Chris Finch was expectedly, I don't know, the word sensitive has, he just was expectedly on edge in the post-game press conference, which is fair given what happened. There's a quote from Chris Finch that Krasinski has on Twitter. Finch says, quote, "We just kind of froze. We didn't move the ball. We just over-surveyed. When we did make the pass the middle of the floor, it was late, and then turnover. And then he also said, it's on me. I've got to get us better shots." If you missed it, I'm not going to rehash the whole thing. You've no doubt saw the Wolves were were up by 20 going to the fourth quarter, up 24 points with 10 minutes to play. The Bucks go on a 26-2 run over the next 7 minutes and ultimately win the fourth quarter 40-13. The Wolves' biggest problem, we talked about this on the postcast yesterday, I talked about it on Wednesday's show, was the postcast Tuesday night and then also on Wednesday's postgame pod. The biggest issue was the stagnation on offense for Minnesota. And I don't think I did a good enough job on Tuesday of emphasizing it was in part because the Bucks played zone. Now, Giannis has something to do with it, yes. But the Bucks were in a zone for a lot of that time. And the Wolves have struggled against zones all year. Teams don't do a lot of it against Minnesota. I think because the theory is they could just go nuts from three. The Wolves were the league's best three-point shooting team last year. They're still a top 10 three-point shooting team this year. And most NBA teams don't play zone like a ton, right? Like Miami. I mean, there's a few teams that have done it more than others. But most teams use it as a change-up, right? Like a change of pace coming out of timeouts, just in the middle of a quarter for a few possessions to try and throw off the other team and basically steal a possession or two. Think of it like coaches that call timeout in the middle of free throws. They're trying to split the free throws. Can I steal a point by icing this guy? Same idea, basically. Like, can we just muck this thing up a little bit? It's the sort of thing that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. People don't always catch on to it, but if it's done well, it can be really impactful. And that's the Bucks just kind of rode this zone for a while. And it helped that it was Giannis plus 4 bench guys who are all eager, fresh, ready to play, more impactful defensively, more active certainly than the non-Giannis 4/5 of the Bucks starting lineup. That was part of it. But the Wolves against the zone have struggled all year. Kyle Anderson, of course, was the zone buster last year. He'd go to the nail. He would distribute. He would just kind of facilitate from the actual just middle of the floor. The Wolves have not found somebody who's consistently good at that. They've at times, the Thunder tried to zone against the Wolves earlier this year. They brought in Joe Ingles. Like we've seen that happen a couple of times. That wasn't going to happen in the fourth quarter of a game. The Wolves were just trying to, you score a bucket or two along the way and you win the game still. And they weren't going to go to Joe Ingles at that point in time. And so it was forcing the issue. As Finch said, they froze. They over-surveyed. When they chose to make the pass to the middle, it was late. And then it was just a bunch of turnovers. We saw Ann have a bad turnover. We saw a couple really bad Julius Randle ones, a bad Donte one. Just a bad stretch where they were just kind of flummoxed by this zone and could not figure out a way to get around it. And it was either force it to the middle late and turn the ball over, or jack a 3 too early in the shot clock. I'm not a get off my lawn. This is too early in the shot clock 3. You can always get it, listen to any college basketball broadcast. Sometimes that's true in college basketball, but a 3 with 17 seconds on the shot clock that's 30 feet and somewhat contested is not a good shot. So it was those two things are what happened, were the biggest issues. I think that Chris Finch had the appropriate level of awareness when it came to that. And while I thought Naz and Donte could have played a little bit more down the stretch, and eventually Rudy came off the floor because they were struggling offensively and defensively. So it's like, all right, let's get Rudy off, see if we can generate some offense. I think there could have been a realization earlier. We got to do something different against this zone. Quotes from the players. Julius Randle said some stuff about how he believes in the team. They can't let it linger. DiVincenzo said, we won 5 games in a row. We play great basketball for 3 quarters. We can't let the world blow up because of this. We have to respond Thursday, knowing that Thursday is a big game, and similar sentiment, right? So, what else are you going to say? There's not enough time left in the season to just be like, all right, season's over, because it's not. If they win the last 3 games, they could still be the 6th seed in the West. And even if they're not, they're going to have an opportunity in the play. And you can't complete. Well, it's the job of fans and podcasts, to potentially, I would say, appropriately react and maybe sometimes overreact, because the context of this is still nuts. We have to acknowledge how crazy this collapse was. But as the team, you have to be a little bit more even-keeled, and that's something that I think Chris Finch takes too much flack for. He's a fairly even-keeled guy, although I feel like this year he's maybe had a bit of a shorter fuse at times with both players and officials. He's always kind of a tell it like he sees it, but still remain laid back type of a coach. And I feel like that's the appropriate message here. And you win your last 3, you go into the playoffs feeling good because you won 8 of your last 9 games, and the only one you lost, you had a historic collapse in, right? That easily could be the narrative 4 days from now. The Wolves have 3 games in the next 4 days, and every opportunity to close the season on a positive note. What I want to hit regarding the rotation is about the bench trio, the bench mob, if you will. Naz Reid, last year's NBA 6th Man of the Year, which, side note, he's not going to win 6th Man this year, and I'm not going to make the case that he should, because there's been a lot of good guys off the bench. But his numbers are actually better this year than last year in a lot of areas. So especially the raw numbers that voters are going to look at. I think the 3-point percentage is down, but points and rebounds per game are up. So the fact that he's not even really in the conversation nationally is kind of crazy. Of course, the Wolves being, finishing probably 6 or 7 games worse than they did last year, or 8 games worse than last year. That plays into it as well. They're not going to be a top 3 seed like last season, but I still think that's pretty fascinating. Anyway, Naz Reid, Donte DiVincenzo, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, those guys were 2 of the 3 of them. Naz and Donte were great against the Bucks for most of that game. Naz had some rough moments in the second half. Actually, Donte did down the stretch too, but they were easily the Wolves' 2 best players in that game. I want to talk about those lineups being the best lineups for the Wolves this season, and what might that mean for Chris Finch's rotation going to the playoffs? What are the actual best lineups along with those 3 guys? We'll talk about all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by Intuit TurboTax. This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with the TurboTax expert who could do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, where you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is also brought to us by our friends at Prize Picks. Baseball season's in full swing now. Twins not off to the best start, but they beat the Royals. They shut them out on Wednesday, so they're 4-8 now. Easily could be 5-7, maybe even 6-6. We could make that case. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2-player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. Whether it's strikeouts, RBI, or first inning runs, Prize Picks keeps every game exciting. You could pick, it'd be fun. I don't know. You could pick Byron Buxton for more than one home run this week, or maybe it's Byron Buxton for more than one stolen base. He's actually got a couple of steals this year, or maybe it's I don't know. I guess Royce Lewis is still hurt. Maybe just Aaron Judge, because that's a pretty safe bet to have more than one home run this week. It's really that easy. Setting up your lineup takes less than 60 seconds. When you win, your payout is quick, safe, and secure. Download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Okay. So the Timberwolves bench trio has been fantastic this year. If you go to Cleaning the Glass and you look at their lineups for the Timberwolves, Donte DiVincenzo, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker together are a 91st percentile three-man unit. They've played over 1,500 possessions together. They're a plus 10 net rating. They're 79th percentile on offense and 92nd on defense. If you go over to NBA.com and use their lineup tool, they do things by games played and minutes played, not possessions, which is a little wonky. And if you look at any lineup that has played more than 500 minutes together, which is admittedly somewhat arbitrary, but I feel like is a solid sample. Like these are all lineups that have played in at least 50, 55 plus games together. The best three-man lineup that's played over 500 minutes is actually Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, and Rudy Gobert. And the one with the bench trio is actually fourth on this list. The second best is Gobert, Naz, and Edwards. The third best is Gobert, Alexander, Walker, and Edwards. And then the fourth best is DiVincenzo, Alexander, Walker, and Reid. A couple of takeaways. First, what surprised me when I went over to NBA.com, the top two Timberwolves three-man lineups are double big lineups with Gobert and Naz Reid. That's observation number one. Number two, you have to go all the way down to like ninth to find a lineup that's played over a three-man lineup that's played over 500 minutes together that doesn't include a bench player. You have to go down to, it is ninth, actually. Gobert, Edwards, and McDaniels are the ninth best three-man lineup. Every lineup 1 through 8, every three-man lineup 1 through 8, in terms of net rating that's played at least 500 minutes, has at least one bench player. And of those 8, 6 of them have 2 bench players, which says a couple of things. One, the Wolves have a good bench, which we've known all season. And two, the starting lineup still has failed to really gel and be as cohesive as we've wanted it to be. You have to go all the way down to the 12th best three-man lineup to find one that involves Julius Randle. It's still a positive. It's a plus 3.8 in over 500 minutes. And then the 13th best, which is a 3.6, is the quote-unquote big three, which nobody's ever called them that. But the three guys that have been all-stars. Say it that way. I guess technically Conley was an all-star once. The 3 multi-time all-stars in Ant, Randle, and Gobert. I think Randle made 2 all-star teams. Maybe only one. Anyway, those three, Randle, Ant, and Gobert, are the 13th best three-man unit. So, a bit of an indictment on the starting lineup. And given that the starting lineup involves well, I don't know, the guys who have struggled the most in the starting lineup are obviously McDaniels and Conley, right? Like those, and Randle. Those three guys have dragged the rest of that unit down at times. And depending on I mean, those are the guys that we've seen not necessarily be on the floor in crunch time, although we've also seen Gobert taken off the floor during crunch time too. In terms of the three-man bench unit with Naz, Donte, and Nickeil, the best lineup with those three guys, like as in the other two players on the floor with the bench unit, are, perhaps not surprisingly, Mike Conley and Rudy Gobert. It's a 95th percentile unit. It's only 231 possessions, but it's a plus 29.8. So basically a plus 30 and a 99th percentile defensive unit. That's the bench trio plus Conley and Gobert. So no Jaden McDaniels in that bench trio or in that lineup. The second best with any volume, weirdly enough, this is super weird, is Josh Minott and Naz Reid. Excuse me, Josh Minott and Julius Randle with DiVincenzo, Alexander-Walker, and Naz Reid. They've somehow played 132 possessions together, which absolutely blows my mind. It's actually a 90th percentile lineup. Small sample, 132 possessions, but it's still the fourth most used lineup that involves those three bench players. So it's a four-man bench unit plus Julius Randle. It's a 90th percentile unit, 82nd percentile offense, and 84th defense. Now, the most used lineup with those three is those three plus Julius Randle and Anthony Edwards. And it's fine. It's a 66th percentile unit plus 11.1, and it's 93rd percentile offensively. But it's a 21st percentile defensive unit. That's a defensive unit with no Rudy Gobert and no Jaden McDaniels on the floor. So it's Alexander-Walker, DiVincenzo, and Ant on the perimeter, and Randle and Naz Reid inside. And it's a 21st percentile defensive unit. Their next most used, which is better, is a plus 13.8, 76th percentile. And that is with Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards. So their two best are with Gobert and Conley, and then with Randle and Minott. Their two most used are with Randle and Randle and Gobert, or excuse me, Ant and Gobert. So what do we take from this? Well, I think it's just simply that those three guys have to play more overall. Now, I've also said lately that I think Jalen Clark could eat into the Nickeil minutes. He should eat into the Jaden McDaniels minutes. And I'm not suggesting the starting lineup changes, but I do think that Chris Finch has waited a little bit long to tweak some of the, shaving a minute or two off of some of these guys. If they're not, like Julius Randle was bad against Milwaukee, and he was second on the team in minutes played. And there has to be an adjustment made, hey, look, Randle's not having a good night. We just got to put Naz out there with Rudy Gobert. I know the Bucks aren't playing huge, but let's do it. And let's see what happens. Right? I mean, the Thunder played without a center for how long, and they figured it out. It's kind of the opposite of that, right? You got to try some of this stuff. And by the way, if you're thinking it's too late in the season, don't go any further than the last week of last year's regular season. Remember, Chris Finch was messing around with the point guard spot, and it was Monte Morris. And then all of a sudden, the last couple games of the regular season and the Phoenix game in game 82, it was Jordan McLaughlin was back in the rotation instead of Monte Morris. And then in the playoffs, it flipped back because they decided they wanted the size of Monte Morris to help contest, he's marginally bigger than Jordan. And I don't say that in a bad way. Chris Finch was trying stuff. And part of it just hadn't been resolved. But it's not too late to try some of this stuff out over the last few games. They're all important. Yeah, they were last year too. They ended up falling to the 3 seed in the West. And obviously, in the playoffs, you're playing your best lineups. But I'm not saying play Josh Minott necessarily. Although it's not the worst idea, because remember, he was great the other night when he had to play after the suspensions. Or when DiVincenzo and Naz were both suspended for a game against Denver. I just think there's some room for creativity here. And Chris Finch is selling things short just a little. I'm not advocating for starting lineup change. I'm not advocating for cutting Jaden McDaniels or Mike Conley's minutes drastically. But I think there can be a bit more trimmed around the edges, a little more Jalen Clark, a little more of this bench trio, and specifically Donte, I think, is the big one. It is going to be a good thing for Minnesota over the final 3 games of the regular season and into the playoffs. There is some latitude there. There's some room to make this work. And I think it's time. I think the way that this team collapsed in the fourth quarter against the Bucks kind of underscores that it's time. All right, let's talk about tonight's matchup against the Memphis Grizzlies. We'll do that next, and then we'll close the show. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swish, you save. Thanks to Dash Pass, every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's really simple. If a player scores 50 or more in a game during this regular season, so you got a little less than a week, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order up to $10 off the next day from noon to midnight. There's a few ways you can take advantage of the deal. Maybe it's the next day after an epic 50-point performance. You just want to get some wings, pizza, burgers, whatever it is from your favorite spot locally delivered straight to your door. Or maybe it's the next night. Maybe it's, tonight. Maybe Ant drops a 50 burger on the Grizzlies, and Friday night you want to stay up and watch some highlights. You just need a snack just before midnight on Friday. Use Dash Pass to grab something delicious while saving big. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. All right, let's talk Wolves Grizzlies. So Minnesota's only played Memphis twice this year. Both were in January, so it's been a minute. A lot has changed. It was weird they didn't play him at all the first, 2.5 plus almost 3 months of the season, and weird that we haven't seen him now in nearly another 3 months. January 11th and January 20th. Each game, the Grizzlies won by a bucket. Now, at the time, Memphis was still like a top 3 seed, top 4 in the West. Of course, since then, they fired Taylor Jenkins. The most recent news on them is they fired Taylor Jenkins after they lost to OKC a couple of weeks ago. Right after that, they proceeded to lose 3 straight games against good teams. They lost the Lakers, the Celtics, and the Warriors, so fine. But now they've ripped off 3 straight. Mostly against Detroit's good, but they beat Miami by a bucket. They beat Charlotte by 24. So they lost to the teams you would expect them to lose to. They beat the teams you would expect them to beat. And now Minnesota, Memphis, which is a fairly even matchup. Our friends at FanDuel have the Wolves as 1.5-point underdogs on the road against Memphis. The Grizzlies are coming off of this 3-game road trip that they swept, coming back to Memphis for a 1-game homestand. So in terms of obviously home court, Memphis favor, but travel, etc. The Wolves are the last game of a road trip and bad taste in their mouths from Tuesday in Milwaukee. Perhaps there's some, maybe that's a little bit of an edge for the Wolves. Standings wise, I want to hit this first to just kind of set this up. As I record this, we don't yet have finals. I'm recording this late Wednesday. So like Golden State's down 4 at halftime to the Spurs. Who knows? I mean, like Golden State should win that game. The Spurs have a slight lead. The Denver and Sacramento it's almost halftime. It's a 1-point game. Who knows? Houston and LA are playing the Clippers. So, I'm not going to give you too much of a standings thing here, other than that there was a 4-way tie yesterday in the West. The Wolves lost. The Nuggets, Clippers, and Clippers, Warriors, and Grizzlies all won. So the Wolves fell to 8th. And there's still a 4-way tie. The Clippers, Nuggets, Warriors, and Grizzlies are all tied between 4th and 7th. The Wolves are 1 game back at 8th. So depending on what happens here tonight, the Wolves are going to be still in 8th in the Western Conference, but may only be a half game behind, say Golden State loses, or Golden State manages to lose to the Spurs, or perhaps, Nuggets and Kings. The Kings have already clinched a play-in berth, so it's more important to the Nuggets, but they're playing right now. Like, anything could happen between the time I'm recording this and the time you hear it. All that to say, the Wolves play Memphis, and they're 1 game behind Memphis. If they win, that then means they would tie Memphis, of course. They do not have the tiebreaker because Memphis beat the Wolves twice earlier this season, so they will lose that head-to-head tiebreaker, but it does matter when it comes to the multi-team tiebreaker we talked about the other day on the show. So, obviously an important game no matter how you slice and dice it, but the Wolves still, it's on the table to finish anywhere from 4th to 8th in the West. It could all happen. It's possible. Those games against Memphis, Minnesota played fairly well and had some late game issues, which we've heard, we've seen multiple times this season. They've done the most important thing, I think, is they've done a great job on Ja Morant this season. Now, Ja Morant's played a little bit differently under the interim coach than he did under Taylor Jenkins this season, at least. The first matchup against Minnesota, Ja had 12 points on 19 shots. He was 0-4 on threes. He had 4 assists and 5 turnovers. Memphis ended up scoring 127 points because Jaren Jackson Jr. stayed out of foul trouble. He had 33 and 8 in that game. The Grizzlies also got 21 from Desmond Bane. He was 4 of 8 from 3. He always seems to kill the Wolves. Brandon Clark was important in that game. He's out. He's not playing. So that does matter. And in that first game, Donte DiVincenzo started. This was just prior to his injury. So he was in the starting lineup and Conley was coming off the bench. DiVincenzo started and had 27, 10, and 7 in this 2-point loss to Memphis. Ant was terrible. He had 15 points on 13 shots, 0 of 5 on threes, 6 assists, but 6 turnovers in that game. So Ant and Ja did not live up to the billing in that first matchup. The next one, which is just like a week later, this was after the DiVincenzo injury now. So Conley's back in the starting lineup. Ant has 32 on 19 shots, but he also turns it over 5 times. Naz has 29 off the bench and 8 rebounds. And Minnesota does a great job on the offensive glass, which is super important against a team like Memphis. Again, Desmond Bane, 22 points. Again, the Wolves do a good job on Ja Morant, holding him to 19 points on 16 shots. Jaren Jackson, once again, stays out of foul trouble, 24 and 11. So the Wolves can guard Ja Morant. The problem is they've struggled to guard the 3-point line against some of these other dudes. And in that game, it was really only Desmond Bane. As a whole, Memphis shot 21% from 3. Minnesota turned it over 16 times, and that's what killed them in that second matchup against Memphis. And, Memphis is a team you can't do that against. You can't give them those additional opportunities to offensively. Overall this season, Memphis is a top 10 team in both offense and defense. I had a prediction at the All-Star break the Wolves would finish the year top 10 in both, and they got all the way up to 9th in offense, I think maybe 8th. They've dropped down to 12th offensive rating-wise on cleaning the glass. Memphis is 6th in the league in offense and 10th in defense. They are now top 10 in both categories. They're the 3rd best offensive rebounding team in the league. So again, rebounding is vital. They're not a great defensive rebounding team. That's an area the Wolves have the ability to steal some buckets, as they've mostly done lately. They did not do against Milwaukee with frequency, but we know Rudy Gobert has been doing a great job on the offensive glass, and the Wolves guards have been doing a good job crashing down. And Memphis doesn't necessarily I know they were trying to have a bit more of a free-flowing offense this year, and that was kind of the goal, and that didn't really work out. I say that they're still a top 10 offense, but it didn't work out the way that people thought it would, which is why Taylor Jenkins is now out of a job. But in terms of pace, Memphis is actually first in the league in pace. They play fast. And so you want to be careful turning the ball over against Memphis. Obviously been a problem for Minnesota this season. It was a problem in both games against Memphis this year. 18 turnovers in game 1 for Minnesota and 16 in game 2. The Grizzlies are going to look to take advantage of the Timberwolves' sloppiness with the ball. And if the Wolves lose this game, it's going to be because they turned it over too many times, which was, of course, a problem at the end of the Bucks loss on Tuesday. It was a massive problem. So that, to me, is the key to this game. Can the Wolves hold on to the ball, not turn it over? Can they continue to guard Ja the way they can, the way they have in 2 games so far this year? And can they get Jaren Jackson Jr. into foul trouble? Can Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle and Naz Reid be aggressive enough? It shouldn't be hard. Like, Jaren Jackson gets into foul trouble a ton, but he hasn't done it against Minnesota this year. Those are all important keys to this game. And hopefully if the Wolves can win, some other stuff goes their way tonight and tomorrow, and they can get back up out of the play-in range in the West prior to games. Friday, I think, is the Utah game, and then another game on Sunday for the Wolves to close out the year. I should say the regular season. Quick note, I am hosting the live postcast tonight over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. I'll be hosting. I believe Jack Borman will be the guest. We will go live 15 or so minutes following Wolves Grizz to break the game down. So be sure to check that out. Subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube. And then if you can't catch it live, the audio feed will be at Locked On Wolves right here. It'll be the next episode in your feed will be the postcast with myself and Jack. And then I'll be back on Friday with the regular postgame pod. I'm also hosting the postcast Friday night. So be sure to tune in that as well. So big thank you for listening here today to the show. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, you can subscribe to the daily newsletter at LockedOnDaily.com. One stop for ultimate Wolves and NBA coverage delivered right to your inbox. Sign up for free now at LockedOnDaily.com. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.